Scaling your law firm doesn't have to be difficult. It's all about mastering a few key strategies, systems, and mindsets. Welcome to the Scalable Law Podcast, where we talk about how you can increase profit in your pocket and time in your calendar. My name is Carolee Fontanelli, and I have successfully scaled my firm so that it doesn't solely rely on me. Now I love teaching other law firm owners how to do the same. Let's transform your business starting now. Welcome to the Scalable Law Podcast. I'm so excited to be here in 2025. I don't know about you, but this year is going to be an awesome year ahead. In Scalable Law, we have got so many amazing things going on, including a Law BizCon, which is on the 8th and 9th of March. If you have not bought your tickets yet, I absolutely recommend it that you do. It's a law conference for law firm owners focusing on your business growth. So whether it is that you want to learn how to market and attract the right clients, whether you want to build a team or automate your firm, everything is going to be there at Law BizCon. We also have a content creation retreat happening in Bali. I have got 3 more tickets left. So if anyone would love to come, it is going to be a week, lots of relaxation and fun, but we're going to be in studio for 3 days, creating and recording content for your law firm. So that could be used for socials, YouTube, videos for your website, you name it. It can be used for that, and potentially you could have a year's worth of content. You could whip out 12 videos, one a month, whatever it might be, and it's just specifically time to get that done. That is on the 2nd of June in Bali. Check out my website to find those details. Well, today we have got special guest Seth Price. I love this guy. He is awesome. He is a law firm owner in Washington, D.C. I met him at the Clio conference. He has a team of 100. So he has truly scaled. He doesn't work in the firm on a daily basis. He left the firm, I suppose you could say, to then go and pursue another business, which is a marketing company for law firm owners. He also has a huge team there. So he is just very successful when it comes to running businesses. He knows exactly what he's doing, which is awesome. So he runs his firm as well as runs Blue Shark marketing, and he's full of knowledge and knows all sorts of amazing things around running your law firm. So today we're talking about your client intake process, which is super interesting because I know as law firm owners, we don't put much thought into this. We often just take calls straight from reception and have our time wasted listening to, people, even though they're never going to retain. So we're talking today about how to reduce that and how to scale your firm through this intake process with Seth. So without further ado, let's get on to listening to the podcast with Seth Price. Welcome to the podcast. We have got Seth Price with us today, all the way from DC and Blue Shark marketing for law firms. How are you going, Seth?
Doing really well. Great to be here.
So the really exciting thing about Seth is that he is not only a law firm owner of a huge law practice and a massive marketing company that helps law firm owners, he's also someone who loves traveling, and he is coming down to Australia to Law BizCon to be one of our amazing speakers. So we're super excited to be hosting you soon, Seth.
I can't wait to be there. As a Sydney Uni graduate, Drewsman, the idea to come back and any reason to be back, honored that you would have me.
It's going to be awesome. So one of the topics that Seth loves talking about, and I think is such an important topic, is onboarding new clients and client intake. And so we're going to get right into that today, because there is actually an art and a science to it, wouldn't you say, Seth?
Absolutely. I mean, look, as a marketing agency, my job or the job of any good marketing agency is to make the phones ring. And that's really, really hard. So if you're a B2C lawyer or whatever type of lawyer you are, like getting somebody to call you is really hard and what you need to build your business, right? If you don't have phone calls, chats, emails, if people are not reaching out and saying, I need your help, you got problems. But the single greatest flaw of almost every law firm is the intake department. And I know that this is not something that is talked a ton about, especially in Australia, but to me, it's the intersection of when the calls are coming in and before the work is being done. If you think about it, that period of time is so ripe with peril. And the worst part is most law firms put their lowest paid, least experienced people in that spot, whether it's because of price, they don't want to pay as much, or because they're like, hey, I'll bring somebody in junior. If they work out, I'll bring them into some other area of the firm. But to me, the sooner that law firms, particularly B2C law firms, get to the point where this is looked at as a revenue center, the sooner you'll be successful. And this is true whether it's injury, criminal, family, migration, you name it. People are calling you in their moment of need. And one of my mentors said, we are not lawyers. Carly, we're going to take off our lawyer hat. We are plumbers. And imagine that the hot water heater in your house has exploded and water's going everywhere. And your significant other is yelling at you to get help. The first person who you connect with, who answers your questions, is going to get your business.
100%.
And if we look at it, that opportunity when somebody calls, and we'll break that down over the course of this conversation, but understanding that if you want to make money, it's not just about getting the phone ringing or about being the best practitioner, but it's can you convert the opportunities into clients?
Yes, 100%. And the other thing that I find that lawyers tend to do, or law firm owners tend to do, is they tend to also have either themselves or a senior associate lawyer who should be billing themselves out at, say, $550 an hour, taking some of these lengthy calls with time wasters. So really, it's how can we use our resources in the firm the best possible way in order to convert people?
And look, I think part of it is a triage approach. First, are you in a contingency practice where you're paying only on success, like an injury? At least that's how we have it in the States.
Yes.
Or is fee for service? Mm-hmm. And those are two different worlds with different philosophies of how to bring things in. But once you sort of have that together, so on the contingency side, in one sense, it is a much easier sale in that you're not asking for any money.
Yes.
All you want is a signature. Yes. And you're off to the races. So in those areas, it's instant gratification. It's true for all of this, but instant gratification and not, look, what are the third rails? Nothing should ever go to voicemail. Nobody should ever be just, have somebody call back. Those are like insane places. If you are spending money and time and effort to get people to call in, how you process that is incredibly important. Over the years, I've evolved. I started with recent college grads that would screen the calls. I've moved on to a much more international approach where you can leverage labor, whether it's not locally in your community, because let's say you're in Sydney or Melbourne, labor is pretty expensive. You may be able to get people in other parts of the country or other parts of the world, frankly, yes, that can screen the call. This is the first piece, is what is a viable lead? If it's injury, have they been injured? If it's criminal, have they been arrested? If it's family law, are they getting divorced? Are they about to be divorced? What is that piece? And once you figure that out and you're now dealing with what I'll call wants, once you're looking at which of these calls are calls that can make you money, then we can move on to the next stage of how are we going to be able to then process it. So first is staffing appropriately. And again, a lot of your firms are starting out or haven't scaled, where I would say the first thing is mentally is moving from receptionist to intake. Mm-hmm. One of the things I did when I started my firm was I had people that worked with existing clients and I had people that worked with inbound calls. And it was started with one guy and a cell phone, and it expanded. Now I have 30 plus people answering the phones. But the sooner that you can make this a dedicated position, the better. Maybe that the person has a couple other tasks, maybe helping you get reviews or other, client follow-ups. But the sooner that it is separate and not a receptionist, but an intake, essentially a version of sales, customer service sales, the sooner you move into that world, the sooner you can squeeze the orange and get all that juice. Because you're paying for the oranges, you might as well be able to enjoy the juice that it creates.
Yes, exactly. And so starting from the beginning of when someone calls, a lot of the time we, as law firm owners, we get calls, but they are absolute, what we would call tire kickers, time wasters. And so from the very beginning, and I know that this is like a whole topic on its own, because really this is about what you're doing on your marketing end. But what's sort of a couple of quick tips to make sure that you're not getting those time wasters? And then what do we do with the clients from that point?
Look, there are many different options. I would argue that on the contingency, it is an easier one because you go through, you could be empathetic, and at some point you're like, this is what we charge, here's the retainer. I would say that for all of these, at the end, I want to see, whether we call it a retainer or a contract, I want to see that sent to a client with the ability to do it from their phone. So that's table stakes. I'm going to the end first, little ADHD item. So if somebody calls up, making sure you have screening questions and that you're staffed appropriately to get through those screening questions. As we evolve, some people may have forms on their website that do some of that. But first, you want to know, is somebody a viable client if, in fact, they get through this piece? Meaning, if you're a criminal lawyer, are they, in fact, arrested? If they're not, and they may be, that could be somebody just looking for information but at the same time, it might become a client later. So you have to balance that out. For family law, if somebody's served with papers versus they just had a fight with their significant other, they're two different points of contact. And this is a decision that everybody has to make. In the States, people are generally free consultations for criminal, whereas many family law practices do a paid consultation. Same with immigration, whereas there are different schools of thoughts. I know some people that do high volume migration where there is no consultation fee, and that's the risk that they're doing. But I think that when doing the consultation, and we're on the fee-for-service side, you need to screen well enough to know that the person is viable if in fact use can, it's somebody who has a need that fits into your box. It's not something you don't do. It's not something that it's not a college student looking for information for a paper. This is somebody that if they need you, are there. So, okay, we now know that they need you, right? The next question is, and let's follow the family law line of thinking. The next question is, as you go through this process, do they have funds? And this, particularly in criminal, because it's a free consultation in the States for the most part, you are, moment one, evaluating the ability to pay.
Yes.
And so, right. So everybody has different philosophies. I love, what does somebody do? In DC, what you do for a living is a starting question at a cocktail party. Everybody has some form of security clearance or government, government background checks. So criminal cases take on a very significant light. And based on what somebody does, asking that question will get you a treasure trove of information, which probably tells you, again, if they need you, there are funds potentially available, versus if somebody says, well, I'm unemployed. To me, it's a hard stop where you want to ask a series of questions. You don't want to be obnoxious about it. But to me, at least in the States, there are free public defenders for criminal cases. And the question is, or there may be family lawyers that charge a fraction of what your firm does for elite work. You're trying to determine whether, in fact, there are any funds. So if it's a college student, somebody in university, you want to know, okay, well, you have no money. Who's going to be helping you with this? The parent? Great. That opens a whole other set of questions. If it's somebody who might be working in a pub, they have friends or family that are going to help them with a divorce, and figuring out where that is. Because just as you said, if there's somebody with no source of funds, you could be the best presentation for the next 30 minutes, but it's not going anywhere. So spending some time up front on the source of funds, to me, is very safe. And again, this isn't like, do you have money? This is asking questions that will elicit it, and that, okay, you work for a consulting firm. Great, we'll move on to the next question. I don't know whether you have money, but it's safe to say that you're in the circle that will be able to do it, versus somebody else where there is no means of income or it's very, very low. It's time to ask some follow-up questions so that great people are not having their time sucked. That's my philosophy, is on the fee for service, making sure, and it's not perfect, right? When I did this, when I started the firm, I had a cell phone and my law partner was a criminal lawyer. And I would answer the phone, somebody speak to me, tell me money is not an issue. And one of my truisms is money is not an issue for one of two reasons. They have so much money that they bathe in Benjamins. That's the $100 bill in the United States.
Yeah.
Right? Or money is not an issue, more likely because there is no money, so it's not an issue.
Right.
So it's constantly, it is not a linear. It is, where are we on money? Spend more time. Oh, red flag on money? Let's ask some more questions. But if you just go straight at it, you're going to end up in the situation where my law partner would go down a call and not talk about money for 40 minutes. And they loved him. And they're like, yo, I got no money.
Yeah.
So the question is, are you getting that vetted throughout the call, just so that you don't have the opportunity cost?
So the biggest mistake at that juncture, where the phone call comes in and people aren't doing these screening calls, but they're getting their receptionist to put it through to the law partner, or to put it through, and then they sit on the call for like 15, 20 minutes doing all this discovery, and they've interrupted their workflow. Like there's a whole range of disaster going on here, right? So at this point, you need to be having an intake person who's asking all of these questions.
Correct. So there are different schools of thought on the fee-for-service side. On the non-fee-for-service side, unless you have bar issues, many people have non-attorneys doing that piece. They may be supervised and somebody can escalate to a lawyer as needed, but that a good, empathetic, sales-oriented admin can very often provide the information needed. Again, ethics rules may require an attorney for certain things, and you should make sure you're following your local rules. That said, on the fee-for-service side, there are varying philosophies on how that close should be done. And I'll lay it out there, and everybody's got to figure out what's right for them. For a higher volume shop, I know of people in the migration space and other areas where they offer free consultations and use non-attorney salespeople, or in the migration space, even attorney salespeople, to do a 30-minute call where they think that they know their numbers and they know that they're going to sign 40%, 45% of those calls, and they can afford to give away an hour knowing that they're going to get one of those two people. Great. I have not fully been able to, myself at my scale, fully figure out the non-attorney salesperson. There are entire groups of people in the United States, lawyers, that subscribe to this, and they basically will sell somebody without the attorney ever getting on the phone for a fee for service, saying, hey, if you don't like the attorney you get a full refund. But it allows you to have real salespeople on that call. There are advantages of that, and that doesn't interrupt the attorney's workflow. And you have people that are better at sales than the attorney doing this. I think it is an area that has some pitfalls to it, in that you become very reliant on one person that can turn over. And you also have a situation where higher dollar clients may not be playing that game. If you want the highest dollar clients, my personal philosophy is those non-attorney salespeople. And I'm in a DC, my market is a very educated market, right? We're talking offline about the area of Potomac. These are wealthy professionals that are not, ne'er-do-wells. They know they've made a buck. They're used to dealing with other professionals. And if a non-attorney is trying to sell them, that might be a red flag. But there are plenty of law firms in the United States that do follow this philosophy. But whether it's a non-attorney or whether it's an intake attorney. To me, that's the best of all worlds, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the person can sell. Some people say you could get a better salesperson who's not an attorney, maybe. But ethically, I love the idea of having an attorney salesperson, and at scale, not the person who's doing the work, because that person is doing their things. Once in a while, there's a very sophisticated question, yes. But in the family law space, somebody should be able to replicate these questions over and over again and bring somebody in and bring them through that process where we work as a team. And if it is a lawyer, then all the better. And we're going to match you up with the right person for your case. And you dance with what you got, so that, if it's, if it's somebody who's female who wants a male, like, you figure out that right balance. But that, to me, if you can get away from that, there's a lot to be said for it. That said, myself, I actually stack the cases. The way I built my own firm is there's intake that screens, but I actually have the end lawyer speak to and sign up the client, but I put it as part of their compensation and part of their incentivization. So there are negatives to it in that it does take them away from other work, but as a business owner, you could just layer more attorneys on potentially, which is not nothing, but that there are benefits to it in that there's less of a gap between the intake and the process being done, less of an opportunity for bad reviews and bad customer service. But there are other people that will have an intake attorney, which I admire and like, to speak to somebody and attempt to close as quickly as possible. The downside of using practitioners is they may be in court, and your intake people are going to have to place hold and make sure that you don't lose the person. But when we start to dig into metrics, the question is, do you have the bandwidth, whether it be a practicing lawyer, intake attorney, or non-attorney salesperson, to make sure that there's as close to instant gratification as possible? And that knowing that the intake person, by screening things out, can set an appointment for a future time certain, rather than somebody will get back to you whenever. That's what you're trying to move away from, to we've solved your problem, you've come to the right place. In a perfect world, especially in contingency, you're signed up that moment. But if you're trying to stack 30-minute consultations, it may not be that you have a person available that second,
yes,
but rather you'll need to be able to slot them in. But you don't want voicemail, you don't want a receptionist, you want somebody who's sold the firm so they can't live without your firm, and they're waiting for that attorney or that salesperson to call them back.
So how long, so say you're doing initial appointments by the 30-minute time slot, how long, like, do you think within the 24-hour period, do you think within that same business day that you need to be getting people in?
The sooner the better. And it's just, there's simply a correlation between time and revenue. And cobbler shoes. We have lawyers, when we look at my numbers, we were looking at, less than 2 hours, less than 4 hours, than 24 hours. And like, all of a sudden you see people, and like, lawyers are people, all of a sudden somebody's family issues at home, they're married, whatever it is, and those numbers slip. And so it is the bane of every lawyer's existence, which is, how do you keep that short? And look, it's also, as you get busier, it's harder, because let's take criminal practice where lawyers are in court all day. Our job is to say, hey, look, you want a great attorney, they're going to be in court. Somebody who can answer your phone the second may not be the person you want. And so we're slotting those calls for later in the day. Same day is ideal. Next day is a long, long time.
Yes.
So anything you can do to set that up, whether it be, we take advantage of that 5 to 7 o'clock period when, lawyers may be done with their work for the day and they use that time to sign up. I don't think there's one size fits all, but you hit it nail on the head. It's how quickly, and the answer is very simple. The sooner the better, understanding that as you scale, it's not going to be instantaneous.
So on times like, say, weekends, when, for example, in my firm, we were running Google ads on weekends, and we would get inundated with calendar appointments over the weekend or email inquiry, but they would be uncontactable on the Monday morning. So
right.
we'd try and get
That's
them, So the solution for that, and what you're suggesting, is to use some sort of calling system, or, even people in the Philippines or Mexico or wherever it is, depending on where you're located, to answer the phone? And at that point, are they then also doing intakes?
Not full intakes. They're doing a screen. I mean, in your world, right?
Yes.
They can't, the person in the Philippines can't close you and shouldn't close you, but they can sell you.
Yes.
And I'm not personally, I don't want to besmirch a country. I have a lot of friends in the Philippines and some workers there. I think that you can do better than the Philippines personally for interpersonal. There's a lot of benefits to it. It's inexpensive, they're loyal, but it's not as flexible a population as far as thought process. I probably shouldn't even say this publicly, but there's pluses and minuses to every country you work for. But whatever you're doing, somebody who can, hey, I'm there, I can solve your problem. So the sooner as a firm you get to some sort of weekend coverage, whether it's your own people or a third party, I don't know if you have solid answering services, but just somebody who can, hey, come to the right place. This is what we do. All we do is family law, and we are ready to help you. When are you free on Monday morning for a call?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Look, technology is getting more and more with Calendarly, and now Google has its own ability to do its own calendar, and maybe the end of Calendarly. The idea that you can do some of this with technology is awesome. And the sooner that your intake person, whether it be a lawyer, intake attorney, whoever's doing it, and especially if it's not paid, the sooner that you can get to the point where you are setting an appointment. And look, as people are more tech savvy, the older population less so, the newer population doesn't even want to speak to anybody. If somebody calls and you have permission to send a text, you can literally text with somebody and have them set an appointment. There's all sorts of variations on it. There's no right way to do it. What's wrong is to ignore it. And the answer is, if you can get up 60% done through texting, great, and set up that appointment. I'm not a fan of it. You're not going to close somebody through texting. But if that text gets it, you know what? For the 40% that don't set an appointment, you have somebody who calls and follows up and say, I saw you're interested. How can we help you?
And there's nothing more frustrating than spending all of that money on ads, for example, and then it just falling flat. Our solution to that was just to simply not do ads on the weekend. So we spend all of our ad spend on Monday to Thursday, and so that we are available when the ads are running. That was sort of our solution, and that's enough for our firm at this stage to feed itself. But
look, where you are in the state, and that's the thing. Think about back to your earlier days. Right? You run an ad on the weekend. You have somebody screen it. If you were lucky enough from your Google ads to get 10 phone calls over the weekend, how many of those 10 do you think that a person could screen out knowing that they were like not urgent? They didn't need a lawyer. They weren't going to retain you. 7, you're down to 3 real viable calls.
Yes. Yeah.
Of those 3, would you be willing, if you got a text, and I'm talking about you starting out.
Yes.
Right? You called up and said, hey, I saw you called. You, even when you're hustling, when you're starting out, when you have less staff, if you could have somebody screen it down to 3, if you had 10, your family would leave you because they're always leaving the table.
Yes.
But if you had 3 phone calls over the course of a weekend where you said, great to speak to you. How can I help you? Let me set this up for Monday morning. They've spoken to you and you're going to solve the problem. We'll speak to them again on Monday. Nothing better.
Yeah.
Right? As you evolve and you want more leisure time, great. You'll have other people in place. But that's why the screening is so important. Because if I'm going to leave the dinner table, it better be for $15,000 to $20,000.
Correct.
It better not be.
And that's exciting, right? Like particularly when you're starting out, or and you really want to get that cash flow working for you, to actually retain a really great client and a really great matter is exciting. So if you could be guaranteed just the best phone calls coming to you.
Exactly. And so what we do is we our intake marks them as high, medium, and low. Is it perfect? It's absolutely not. They're going to have a high value one, and you're going to leave your kids, and you're going to take a phone call, and the person has no money, and they're going to make a mistake sometimes that something's marked. Not often. It's usually not the other way. Or it's marked low, but it turns out great. So be it. But you try your best to balance quality of life while you're doing it yourself. And with time, some firms have an on-duty attorney, where if you have 4 attorneys in the firm, one person takes each weekend. There's no right or wrong way to do it. But the key is the closer you get to instant gratification, the better.
So another thing that I noticed in our system in previous years, we had a calendar app that had photos of each of us, each of the lawyers in the firm. And what I found was that it was way less effective. And I believe it's because people hop on a calendar app like that and then they get distracted with, I don't like the look of her and she doesn't look old enough and maybe I want a male and, all of that kind of stuff. So what we've tried to do with all of this process is to keep it as neutral and as blanket and as the less decisions the client needs to make at that early point, the better. What do you think about that?
No, look, there are strengths and weaknesses. I want both. If you can get somebody to commit and you put an appointment on their calendar, that's pretty freaking strong. It doesn't get much better than that. And what's even stronger than that is that plus a phone call to say, thank you so much. We're excited. Is there anything I can help you with? Before then, the concierge service. One of the books that's taking the U.S. by storm is Unreasonable Hospitality, about 11 Madison, a restaurant in New York that was like over the top service and became the number one restaurant in the world. Amazing book. If you haven't read it anywhere for business purposes, I think there's nothing better right now. And so what I would say is it's everything. It's if you can get that person to commit and you have a calendar invite and they say yes, you have a pretty good chance of getting that person there. I don't think there's any harm of following them up. It's not like that saying you can't reach out to them any other time. And look, I'm in the funnels all the time, as you are, on the B2B side. And I actually got miffed at one because they actually called me an hour before my assigned appointment, like by phone. I'm like, why are you bothering me? Like I was almost too much.
Yes.
But I feel like when you are in and the truth was, I wasn't probably the right customer for them in the first place. But if somebody really needs you and they set an appointment and you call as a reinforcement call, like that's even better. But it's, I look at some of this, the art of sales a lot goes back to like dating by analogy. If a guy walked to a bar and said, will you marry me? You'd probably slap on the face and walk out, right? But if somebody meets you and you have a drink and then you might have dinner sometime, and then you might catch a ball game, like over time, you're building that relationship so that the intake is part of that dance. The more you can move from hello, nice to meet you, will you get married, to, hey, I spoke to your intake person. I set up an appointment for this. Somebody else touched me to see how I'm doing. Then I had my call. The more touch points you have, the more likely you are to form some sort of relationship. And again, you see it in the B2B world. We met each other at the Clio conference. It was nice to meet you. We then did a Zoom. Each of these things built a relationship. And I think that in a micro sense, the more touch points you can have, the better. So I don't turn any of them down. If you went just technology, I don't think that's great. But every layer that you have adds one more potential opportunity to become closer.
Yes, and build trust. It's all about building trust, isn't it?
Well, and trust, and the idea that once you've had those multiple touch points, there's more vested. They've had a mini relationship with your firm, and therefore it's no longer just a person they called, because they may be calling 5 or 6 people. And the fact that they've now, and they can't remember who they called and when. But if you can somehow differentiate, that's also a whole nother conversation for another day, why I think it's so important your intake people not be somebody from way out of your area, but the more they know about your place. In the United States, you can tell by area code where somebody's calling from.
Yes.
So if you know somebody from Sydney and you have a favorite food truck where they sell that meat pie down by the water that you love, and you're able to ask, do you live, and the person lives in, the more you can localize and have some sort of interpersonal piece, or if there are 2 sports teams in a town and you ask which ones they like, all of a sudden you're creating something that's memorable away from just the facts into that interpersonal piece.
That's right. Also, so you've done the intake, but say they haven't signed up with you. How important do you think follow-up calls are? Because I don't think a lot of law firms are necessarily doing follow-up calls. They do the intake process, the client doesn't retain, and then that's the end of it. So what? No,
this is basic salesmanship 101. And we think a lot of ourselves. That's why I think a retainer goes out to everybody. But, there are going to be 3 minimum phone call follow-ups. There's going to be emails, texts. The answer is, I remember this is the analogy I'll give you. Take a criminal lawyer. Somebody straps their kid in the back seat of a car in a car seat, is drunk, and drives into a phone pole and wrecks their car. They're not making good decisions. When they start looking for a lawyer, it's not like all of a sudden they're a different person, they're making good decisions. They're still in denial. And therefore, our job, they may make the phone calls, they know they need a lawyer. Same with family law. But then they're like, you know what, maybe, who knows, if you can be there when they need, like, they're not thinking minute to minute necessarily rationally. If you can sort of continue to be that safety net, they want to speak to somebody, but they may not be willing to pick up the phone. But when they see the number and they pick it up and it's the right moment, you may call once and they're with their kids. You may call again, they're with their boss. It may take a third time till you find them at that right moment. And A/B testing, time of day, method, there's texting over email is going to be incredibly powerful. Anything you can do to interact with that person is going to substantially raise your likelihood of success.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. So there's so much on all of this intake, and like we started the call with, it's so important because really if you've got the phone ringing and you've got clients coming in, one, we need to make sure they're quality, the ones that can actually afford to retain us. And two, we need to then work with them and be available. In this world, we need that instant gratification. We want, and I'm no different. You gave the plumber analogy. I recently hired a plumber. Well, I very quickly lose interest if they don't get back to me straight away. Right. And so that's what we need to make sure we implement in our firm. Having a lawyer as an intake person is the way to go.
Look, and it depends on your ethics laws. Again, I'm somebody who's not telling you there's one way to do it, but pick something and play with it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, tweak it. But look, and if you're a solo, you can't have an intake attorney. You don't have that bandwidth. You're wearing multiple hats. And the more that you're able to, as you can get your marketing ramped up to the point where you can afford that, to me, that's an incredibly powerful transformation. So the solos, yeah, you're going to have to play all of that. But what you can do is you can do, how do I put this? You can use non-attorney labor to at least get yourself to the meaty cases. Not that some people are going to be tire kickers, but the more you learn and say, you know what, that was a tire kicker. Let me add a question to my intake to try to avoid that.
Yes. One of the things that we do what's called a triage call at our firm, but I've also implemented a triage call with Scalable Law. And I actually have a law student. So, and there's no reason that someone couldn't do this in their law firm if they were solo, is have a law student. The triage call goes into the law student's calendar and then they qualify them before I speak to them.
Right. So look, all the law student is fractional labor. And the sooner you have enough resources not to have a fractional lawyer who's going to turn over all the time, the better. But you know what? It's better than nobody doing it, and they're going to be great. But as you know, some law students will be great, some won't. They're green, but at least it's in that. That's why I used to go with recent college grads for that. Yes. But I think the international labor market now allows you to expand. There's no right or wrong answer. Figure out what you're comfortable with, what's possible, but stop doing it where you're answering the phone straight away, because that is crazy talk. Because not only are you not screening things out, it's not good for quality of life, it's not good for business. Putting layers in place.
Yes.
Again, you can't have 20 layers if you're a solo, but making sure that piece by piece, you're removing yourself as the first line of defense.
Yes, absolutely. And we haven't explicitly said this, but I'm assuming when you're getting any of these people to talk to potential clients that it's scripted in some sort of way.
It's funny. That's the best answer. We have gone from talking points to scripted over time, but you need it to be natural.
Yes.
So, and on the intake in particular, you could script the screening can be scripted. Absolutely. It's what the attorney or non-attorney salesperson is doing. It's, there are scripts that are a piece of it, but there's a certain amount of making it conversational. That's
yes.
really, really important.
Yeah.
But I'll leave you with this as a final point before we wrap up, which is, and we could do a whole other piece on this, but if you add one piece to this, whether it's the screening up front or whether it's an attorney salesperson, assuming your ethics laws allow for it, record the calls and coach with that.
Yes.
So important.
Yes.
And that's when you get to a real level of proficiency.
Yes, my experience with that is learning that my very technical lawyers were being so technical on these calls that they were absolutely turning clients off because they're just giving way too much and the clients leave completely confused. So it's very interesting doing that exercise, seeing what actually happens on these calls with your team.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been so great. This is a huge conversation, and I was lucky enough to be on Seth's podcast. So you can hop on over to, it's actually on my website, so you can hop onto the website and check out Seth's podcast. He did a whole series with various lawyers and specialists on intake. So it's definitely worth going over and finding that. And can you also just let us know where people can find you if they are interested in getting their law firm marketing done through a specialist team?
So we're Blue Shark Digital. Easy to find me online, BLU Shark Digital. Seth Price. Feel free to reach out, through socials, any which way. Any friend of yours is a friend of mine.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Seth.
Thank you for listening to the Scalable Law Podcast, brought to you by the Scalable Business Lounge. If you would love to know how you can get more clients without relying on referrals, head over to scalablelaw.com to watch my free masterclass. Until next time, you have got this.